I would just much rather have someone that's less knowledgeable and hungry and willing to learn, that's going to give 100% effort and just really wants to improve and see a career, out of the role that they're in and wants to grow along with everyone else, than someone that's just sort of stuck in their ways and is just here to collect a paycheck and just isn't 100% invested.
This is Facility Rockstars, the podcast that celebrates the unsung heroes of our daily lives, facility professionals. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Join me as we honor these great leaders, sharing stories, insights, and expertise that empower us all to learn and grow together. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Coludus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Welcome back to Facility Rockstars. I'm your host, Jay Culbert. Today's guest is awesome. He is a seasoned leader in facilities engineering with a deep background in managing large-scale, Class A commercial life sciences properties, including multi-building office parks totaling over 1 million square feet. With extensive expertise in MEP systems, fire and life safety, sustainability initiatives, and building management systems, he brings a strategic and detail-oriented approach to every aspect of operations. He's led high-performing, cross-functional engineering teams, optimized preventive maintenance programs, and ensured compliance at every level, city, state, and federal. He's also a pro at managing vendors and contractors, planning for emergencies, and overseeing major capital projects. On top of that, he's demonstrated consistent success in budget development and fiscal management, always with a sharp eye on operational efficiency, tenant satisfaction, and long-term asset value. He currently serves as the Chief Facilities Engineering Manager, Life Sciences at Hobbs Brook Real Estate. Mike Bernabei, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jay, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Mike. Thanks for being here, man. We're thrilled to have you on the show today. What I'd like to ask you first is, what's been your biggest lesson learned, given your extensive background?
It would be prepare for the worst and hope for the best, just given situations. And I feel like you can never just predict the future. And it's never a worse situation than planning for something to go smoothly and not having enough resources or manpower, and then something going south on you, and then be scrambling to get everything back online and just, fix the situation to where it should be.
So resonates. So we love the idea, the topic, and it's so real. So tell us more. Like, what do you mean by that? Maybe an example.
I think like a big example was, a few years ago, I was February of 2023, and we had that Arctic chill in Massachusetts coming in, and it was first kickoff of it was sort of Friday night going into a Saturday. The temperature started to drop overnight, and, was running a life sciences building. And we had, a pretty good plan in place with on-call engineer, staying overnight and local to the area just in case if something popped up. And all of a sudden, air handler unit shut down. The exhaust unit stayed on, was sucking cold air into the building. And so first engineer responded, got the system online, but at that point, it was down for too long. And there was in a situation where a doghouse for the mechanical piping at the top of the building wasn't secured properly. And with the heavy gusts of wind, it blew off, creating almost a vacuum effect with, freezing air getting sucked into a lab area of the building. Froze up some sprinkler heads, a water line. And, at that point, there was one engineer and, started making phone calls, and it was pretty much an all hands on deck situation. And, were able to respond quick enough, close off the sprinkler valves, isolate the water. And, that saved everything. But then we were still multiple days, through that week with the colder temperatures. So had a plan for, 24/7 around the clock, manpower to be on site, and just have all eyes on the building in case anything thawed up overnight once the temperatures let go a few days later. And it was just a real, tough situation, and just sort of ingrained in me, moving forward, always, have a plan in place just to be able to respond quick enough and just to have the manpower available just to, meet the demand of what can happen in a commercial building.
Oof. Rough situation. Just another day, or should I say night, in facilities management, right, Mike?
Correct. Yep.
Yeah, right. So I guess so the takeaway, like what have you been able to put in place, or have you been able to put anything in place? Like, how do you hedge against that particular type of occurrence happening again in a cold front?
I just think with like not even a cold front, just even just a typical electrical shutdown, a mechanical shutdown, just I always think worst case scenario now of what could be the most catastrophic thing that could happen, and how does my team and I respond to that? And just
Mm,
to have the manpower in place, talk through the different scenarios beforehand the day before, and just have everyone on the team on the same page, make sure if it's a mechanical vendor, working with us, to resolve an issue or to, do work on the building, facilitating the shutdown, just make sure all the contact information is shared. Everyone knows who to talk to, who to call. If there's someone else, outside like with tenant communication, make sure they're looped in to provide real-time updates as quickly as possible, just so everyone can respond as quickly and as efficiently as possible.
it sounds like really good, proper, prudent, like thorough planning. That's really where you're going with that. That's smart, very smart.
100%.
So I know we have a lot of topics that you and I wanted to cover today. And one of them is building a reliable and knowledgeable facilities team. Could you explain, what that means to you, and how do you do that, Mike?
I think at a starting point is you need to have enough manpower on the team to meet the demands of the portfolio you're managing, because it doesn't help anyone if you're short staffed. And obviously people take vacations, people get sick, so you can never expect to have 100% coverage at all times. But you need enough people to meet the demands of the tenants, the PMs that are required. A lot of it is vendor escorting in, on site, just to have eyes on the vendors to provide proper access to work with everyone. So if you don't have enough manpower, you're going to be scrambling on a daily basis in order to meet all the demands that's required of you. So that would be the starting point. And then the next step would to have knowledgeable engineers that complement each other, because everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. And if you have a team full of facility engineers who all have the exact same strengths, you're going to leave yourself open to shortcomings at different aspects. So, and it's not a perfect world. You can't always do that. They're going to have some overlap, but ideally you would want someone strong in HVAC, strong in
Mhm.
electrical. And this goes across everyone, is have a solid idea of life safety systems, fire alarm, sprinkler, plumbing, shut off valves, how to isolate different things as they pop up,
Mhm.
and then just have, a good idea of your team's strengths and weaknesses, and be able to put them in roles that they're strong in, but also have other engineers work with the engineers that are stronger to get brought up to speed where there's room for improvement. And then the other thing too is have a team with a growth mindset that is hungry to learn, and that wants to, that's going to give 100% effort, because you could have the most knowledgeable person in the world on your team, but if they're not willing to grow as technology changes, or be able to mentor along, less knowledgeable engineers or new hires, you're just going to be spinning your wheels. And I would just much rather have someone that's less knowledgeable and hungry and willing to learn, that's going to give 100% effort and just really wants to improve and see a career, out of the role that they're in, and wants to grow along with everyone else, than someone that's just sort of stuck in their ways and is just here to collect a paycheck and just isn't 100% invested.
I love it. Multiple points you made there, and a couple I wrote down while you were talking was the complementary nature of your team. and how they work together and complement the strength of the whole, really is what I heard you
Hmm.
say. So critical. My question about that is, how do you, or do you go back to the recruitment process? Like when you're building a team, do you involve, human resources, and how do you make sure that you're getting this complementary nature in your team?
Well, it starts with human resources. That's, job posting, human resources vets, who's applying, see who would be a good fit that meets the minimum requirements. And then, me and my, facility supervisor conduct the interviews of the resumes we were, forwarded to them, read them over, sort of see who think we would be a good fit, and then, go through the interview process and just pick their brains from there, ask about their backgrounds, talk about hypothetical situations that, if you were called in the middle of the night, walk into, the lobby of the building and there's water pouring out of the ceiling, what's your first move? And
Oh,
just
I
see
love that question. You put them right in the moment.
right in the moment and see how they'd respond to it. And if they freeze up in a situation asking a question during an interview and don't have a solid response, it's probably not going to be a good fit long term unless it's just people get stressed out, people get nervous. If it's something like that, it can be looked over, but sometimes you don't always get the answer you're expecting, put it that way, from, someone you're interviewing that has, a solid resume.
Well said. Yeah, that's a very good technique. I might borrow that. You also touched on growth mindset, and I love that because, versus, I heard you say someone who's like, you didn't say this, but someone who's already arrived or they're kind of plateaued in their growth trajectory. They might be really good today, but what will they be in a year? So yeah, I love that. Anything more on growth mindset or any examples you've seen of that?
I've just seen like I've seen a lot of engineers in my career just sort of get to a level and just spin their wheels and not really progress. And then I've seen other engineers with limited knowledge, but just a really good attitude, a really good drive, a really good hunger for knowledge that just goes above and beyond, just, they're not even meeting the minimum requirements, just always go way overboard. And just someone that asks a lot of questions. It's because that's just so important, just to have someone that wants to get the information, because in a facilities engineering role, it's almost like free schooling in a way, because every day you're put into a different situation and you can always learn from that. And it's like same thing like being put on an escort. Like not all guys love escorting, like, and get kind of boring at times. You're just sort of standing there. But if you're escorting a licensed plumber around, a licensed electrician, an HVAC, tech, you can pick his brain, you can watch what he's doing, and you can learn so much just from being a fly on the wall and just watching, asking questions, and just learning from the experience. And just, as time goes on, if you go through every single day just looking for opportunities to learn and people to talk to, people to ask, people to mentor you, even if it's on a low level. You may never see that person again, but if you ask every person you're escorting a few questions every time you do it, your knowledge is going to level up so much over the short few years that you wouldn't even recognize the person from a starting point to, an ending point in over that couple year span.
Right, that's the first time that's come up on the show, and what a great perspective. Like, that's a mindset shift for people, or a choice, right? You could be bored on an escort, like you said, or just free schooling. Great quote.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's what you make of it.
Hmm. Awesome. You touched on communication, and I know that was something we wanted to expand on a bit more. Like how I think you referred to it as the backbone of facilities operations. What do you mean by that? What are some best practices you and your team exercise on a daily basis so others listening could learn from that?
I just feel that communication just it's not even in facilities, but just in life in general. Like being a good communicator can take you so many places and just make life easier. But from a facilities perspective, if just for an example, if there's a guy, an engineer, doing his morning rounds and finds a leak, leaking pump or something, shuts down the pump, keeps it to himself, doesn't say anything. Then the next engineer that comes in sees, maybe checking the BMS system, sees the pump off, goes and investigates that thinks a pump's down, calls a vendor in to look at it, and it just can snowball of just if the first guy just said, I found this, send an email out, group text, keeps everyone in the loop. It prevents other people wasting their time just for a simple issue that could just be resolved quickly. And then so you're going to waste someone else's time looking into it to try to resolve it. And like another thing with communication that me and my team try to do is we have, group emails, group texts. So it's like throughout the day, if there's a situation popping up, or even just a vendor on site, so-and-so showed up, they need an escort over to an electrical room. Who's available? And you send it out to the entire team. Someone responds really quickly, and then that's taken care of. Where if you don't have that open communication and, line to everyone, it's just, you're going to be wasting valuable time on a daily basis. And like my biggest thing is, in a role like this, is time is so important. There's never enough of it in the day, and you have to constantly manage it and prioritize, from a critical task that needs to be done immediately to something you can push back a little and get to, when you have a little more freedom. And it's just, the communication plays such a huge role in that.
Great points. And you answered one of the questions I was going to ask you was, what's the form of communication? It sounds like group text and group email is the most effective and efficient for you. Is that accurate?
That's accurate in the day to day. And then like the other thing with communication is just having, like, to the rest of, property management teams, to tenants, is just, writing thorough email updates that are going to get to all the stakeholders that would need to know this information, because it doesn't help anyone if you only update one or two people and not everyone involved that would need to have that knowledge, because then the next person may get an email from someone else asking for an update that someone else already gave, but they weren't looped into it. So it's just knowing on who to reach out to at the appropriate times to keep everyone in the loop just keeps everything flowing so smoothly during the day. And then, like, I would say from a tenant perspective too, is just having open communication to your facilities team. Is we can't be mind readers. So if there's an issue, speak your mind, call me, text me, whatever needs to be done. Cause my biggest thing is I want to drive a great tenant experience, and I'm always here to help, and I will help in any way possible just to drive a great experience and just to help out any, cold temperature in a conference room, piece of machinery not working, even if it's not ours, if they just want an opinion of like who to call, if they don't have a vendor lined up, like, we're always here to help, but we can't help unless we get that communication of the problem.
Was it drive a great tenant experience? Is that what you said?
Correct. Yeah.
That's awesome.
When someone walks in our buildings on a daily basis, I want it to feel like walking into a 5-star resort on vacation. Like, I want it to be at that level. Like it's walking into a great place. You're excited to be here. There's no shortcomings. Everyone's comfortable. Everyone has what they need. It just, because just with the return to the office, everyone's been hybrid, remote. Like, no one likes to commute into work. But if you're going into a great environment, in the collaborative environment with a great team, it makes it so much better just to come into work on a daily basis, and it just motivates people. It's just a good spot to be.
My takeaway there was I just heard your big why. Like, why you're so driven to be excellent at what you and your team do. Like, you're delivering this experience for your tenants. That's amazing. Well done.
100%.
Can you tell us a little bit about leadership through approachability, Mike?
Yes, absolutely. I think being approachable as a leader is just such a key thing to have, because I think we've all experienced it, having managers in the past, and just, you have a question, but you just want some clarity on something, but if you're afraid to approach them just for something simple because you're afraid you're going to get blowback, they're going to talk down to you, next time you have a question about something that could be critical, you're going to hold it close to your chest and just say, I think this is the way to do it, but I approached so-and-so before and got negative feedback. They made me feel small. I don't want to go in that direction again. So I'm just going to do what I think's best, even though it may not be best. And then you end up in a poor situation. And then, like I talked about before, growth mindset is, it's tough to grow if you can't approach your superiors for guidance and to pick their brains for leadership. So for me, I feel confident all the guys on my team will call me at any point if they have a question to me, and I'm clear about that, is if I can help in any way, reach out to me. Don't, if it's something simple that you can figure out by talking to your lead engineer or engineering supervisor, go in that direction first. Like, don't call about the location of something simple. But if I can really be a help to you, and it's knowledge that I have, please reach out, and just, I want to be that person to help you. I want to mentor you, and I want to be able to, facilitate taking my team to the highest level possible.
So for other leaders who are listening, then Mike, what's a best practice you would advise them on if they didn't think they were being approachable enough and wanted to be more approachable? What would you say?
I would say is getting to know your engineers on an individual basis in your team, and, holding training sessions to, elevate their knowledge, have conversations of what would you like to know more about? What do you think your shortcomings are and that you could improve upon? And like, how can I facilitate getting that? Like, we're willing to bring in any type of person to perform any type of training that would, elevates the team performance and knowledge level. And there's a lot of options out there, but without having the open communication between one another, we don't know where that is. And, it's like I was saying before, some, engineers are stronger at other things than others. So you might be able to conduct a training internally and just have someone shadow someone for a week just to get up to speed on what they're doing and have that knowledge level. Or you might have to, bring in an outside vendor that's, has that knowledge level, that just to do a team training. And, talking about that too, is I think having like team lunches and just time just to just talk as, amongst each other, just as people, and just, not even work related. It drives, getting to know one another and just having, a more sense of just ownership as a team. Because like at the end of the day, you need to take ownership on the buildings you're managing, and no one wants to do that solo. If you have feel in a good team environment, and other people have your back and you have their back, and everyone can help each other out when the times get tough or a situation arises, you're going to be that much stronger, moving forward.
Hey, rock stars, if you're tuning into the podcast and are feeling overwhelmed by all the maintenance demands at your facility, don't stress. We've got you covered. Our sponsor, Coludis, is your go-to partner to help you tackle all those demands and get them done right, on time, and with top-notch quality. From project planning to execution, Coludis is there to make hard work easy. Visit coludis.com today to get started. I think you just gave 8, 9, maybe even 10 examples. That was awesome. And the biggest thing I heard too, Mike, was get close with your team. Get to know them on an individual basis. Yeah. Awesome. We have a ton of stuff to cover. So I want to jump right to, you mentioned vendors, outside vendors for training, but what about partnering with quality vendors? I think that's a topic you and I touched on previously.
Yeah. So at the end of the day, you can do a lot of stuff in-house, but unless you have a massive facilities engineering team, you're going to have to rely on outside vendors, especially when it comes to, certain life safety stuff like sprinkler, fire alarm. We outsource our HVAC work, for PMs and stuff like that. So having a vendor that's responsive, that's, back to the communication, has open communication with you, because nothing's worse than having someone just show up unannounced, 7 a.m. in the morning. Hey, I'm here to do this today. Well, that's great. You didn't say anything to anyone on the team or me. And we have another shutdown that's happening. That's an all hands on deck situation. And 2 of the guys are out on vacation this week. And, the supervisor has a 4-hour meeting for a training or something like that. Like, no one likes to be blindsided. So back to the communication is just having a vendor that communicates to you with what their schedule is. And then same thing, if there's a cancellation, I've had vendors in the past, we're going to be here, Wednesday at 10 a.m. It's Wednesday at 2 p.m. and you're hearing crickets. You can't get a hold of anyone. Oh, someone called in sick today. Well, that's great. Like, I understand, but how come there wasn't an email or just a text message or something just to loop us in? Because we had, and then dedicated to assist with what you were supposed to be here for today. And now you didn't show up. It could have been something very important that couldn't wait time wise. Now it's pushed a week away. And it's just, it's an unfortunate situation. So I think like the biggest thing for me vendor wise is great communication, reliable, and then people that love what they do, because nothing's better than having a vendor on site and having someone genuinely excited to show up and wanting to help you out and do a great job. Like, and it's just, and it makes me as a, an engineering manager just feel great just to have vendors that have a great attitude, great communication, and are just always willing to work with you and go the extra mile. Or if I need an update on something or call them, they answer the phone, even if they're not on site. Happy to speak to me, happy to just fill me in on the information or knowledge that I needed, just as, send off an email or update the rest of the team. It's just, it's a great spot to be in, just to be able to trust your vendors.
Great rundown. Spot on too, I would say. And, one thing you shared was, the 10 a.m. and it's 2 p.m. and you've got crickets. Like, well, look, there is no good or bad news. It's just news. It's just communication. Give me an update, right?
Yeah,
They
exactly.
need to know status.
Yeah, life isn't perfect, and being in facilities, every day is a different adventure, and nothing goes according to plan. If something goes according to plan, like buy a scratch ticket that night because things are working in your favor. But, I'm never going to get upset if someone doesn't show up, if there's a circumstance for it that supports that, but just ghosting us and not giving the update is just a no-go for me.
Makes a ton of sense. How about managing legacy versus modern buildings? We touched on that too, and that's kind of a universal thing. Like most of our listening audience is going to relate to what you have to share here on that.
Yeah, so starting with legacy buildings, I feel like the strategy there is, for one, to have a great 5-year capital plan of your mechanical systems and what's approaching the end of its life. Because if you have a cooling tower, for example, that's at the end of the line, corrosion, leaks, lots of problems, and all of a sudden, mid-July, that fails completely, there's nothing you can do about that at that point. There's long lead times, and that's a lot of money. You're probably approaching $1 million or more for a cooling tower replacement. But if that's coming from 4 years out per se, and you can plan for that, capital planning, say, 2028 or 29, let's replace this cooling tower before it gets to that point, you're going to set yourself up for success. And that just goes same thing with even facades on a building. I've been in buildings before where you're getting insect infiltration, water leaks, just because the facade wasn't maintained, where if you can maintain the facade, caulking, sealing, inspections, making sure everything's good, and just budget for that, you're going to set yourself up for success. Where,
Mike, I have a question real quick on the legacy and the 5-year capital plan. So commonly we hear, well, there isn't a budget for that, or what's a best practice you've found that's been successful for, allocating that future funding and justifying it, getting it approved and planned out?
It's coming back to communication again, because if you're finding issues and you're keeping it close to the chest and not saying anything to the rest of your management team, no one's going to know about you. But if you're transparent with everyone, hey, I was over at such and such a building today. Seems like there's some additional water leaks coming in from the facade, or, the cooling towers, there's more leaks because of corrosion or something like that. People don't like to be blindsided. So if you're open about what's coming and what you're seeing on a daily basis, no one's going to be blindsided by that. That's a decision maker as far as approving capital budgets. But if you don't say anything, and then all of a sudden budget season comes around and you start dropping tens of millions of dollars worth of stuff you want put in for, the following year's budget, that's, no one's going to appreciate that. And it's not going to be feasible, just because that type of capital just isn't, floating around on a short term like that.
Well said. And I'm thinking in my mind, if we had a dartboard for our conversation here, the red bullseye is one word: communication. Almost everything you're talking about is going right back to that
Hmm.
topic. Yeah, great walkthrough. Did you want to touch on the modern buildings? Is there anything there as well?
Yeah, we can touch on that briefly. I
Sure.
just, with the modern buildings, nothing should be failing at that point if it's within, 5 years per se. But what I've come to see with modern buildings is things don't always operate the way they were designed. So it's a lot of tweaks that have to be made to get modern buildings to function how you're expecting them to function. And it's not, they usually function good enough to get by, but it's almost like you don't want your building to get to the finish line limping. You know what I mean? You want to run an 8-minute mile to get to that finish line. You don't want to have
Mhm.
to drag yourself across the finish line. So that's just, a big part of it is just identifying what's not functioning correctly in the newer buildings and then using your resources to determine a solution and then implementing that solution.
Got it. So let's pivot over to mechanical system optimization. Actually, it's not really a pivot, right? Because we were talking about mechanical systems a moment ago here. Without compensation conflicts. Can you expand on that, Mike?
Yeah, so I think you don't want to have systems compensate for each other. And like what I mean by that is, say you have an air handler unit and it's doing 100% outside air, wintertime, you're bringing in 20 degrees. You're going to go through a heating coil to bring that air temperature up to where it needs to be at the discharge air temperature set point.
Hmm.
But it doesn't do you any good if you're overheating it. Say if a set point's 55 degrees, you're overheating that to 65 degrees. And now you're opening your chilled water valve to bring that 65 degrees back down to 55 degrees. It's,
Mm.
the hot water coil should be able to get that temperature and be dialed in enough to hit that 55 degrees without having to use another mechanical system. So
And
it's just looking for areas in the building where multiple systems are working together to get to the same end game that one system could accomplish.
and how would you say is the best method? What's the best method of achieving that?
For me, it's using the BMS system to run trends.
You just ran into my next question. Well done, Mike.
Yes, I know.
Go for it.
But yeah. So just, a building management system with today's technology, they're super powerful. You can go back multiple years of trend data and you can tweak stuff so you can see how the hot water system is playing into the chilled water system, is going to the air handler units. You can link in outside air temperature so you can see how it's performing on a 20-degree day versus a 40-degree day. Maybe it's functioning fine in 40 degrees, but you have issues in 20s or vice versa. There's just so many things you can look at. So I think at the end of the day, it's curiosity too, because I'm a curious guy. I just like looking at trend data, looking at graphs, and just seeing where inconsistencies are and just running multiple data points through the system. And then if I find something that, seems off to me, then I can change the trend data and look at different systems or incorporate that. And then just looking at everything as a whole, just to try to get, to where we want to be with everything running as efficiently as possible.
I love that you said curiosity because I'm going to build a bridge here, then bring it right back to growth mindset. Like clearly, you're of that thinking. You have to be curious to have a growth mindset. And
100%.
yeah, great touch on the BMS too. So, thank you. So let's talk about energy consumption, detecting, reducing excess. As a whole topic, how would you want to expand on that for the audience?
Well, for me, I use energy profiling software that pretty much captures, the kilowatt consumption of the buildings on a daily basis, 24/7, 365. And, same, it sort of goes back into the trends because it's like a BMS trend, but you're doing it with electrical meters instead. So for For life science buildings, it's a little more complicated because, laboratories, they're running 24 hours a day. You're not shutting off the mechanical. So it's kind of tougher to distinguish, what's excess in that regard. But for just a regular, like, commercial office building that you're doing startup at 6 a.m., you're shutting the HVAC systems off at 6 p.m. If you're looking at that profiling software and you're seeing random spikes, 2 a.m., 3 a.m., drawing a lot of energy, something's off there and something's turning on schedule wise when it shouldn't be. So then, to follow up on that, it's then you're diving into your BMS schedules and seeing why is this identifying the equipment that's turning on. But if you're seeing a large spike, it's probably a rooftop unit or a chiller, a boiler, something. It's, you know what I mean? It's not going to be a space heater or something like that. That's in a sprinkler room, just trying to keep it hot. Like that's, not going to draw enough. It's going to be a major piece of equipment. So it should be a little bit easier to figure out what piece of equipment's running, but then it's figuring out why it's happening and then finding a solution so that doesn't happen. And then like another, just to play into that a little more, another spot where I tend to see that happen a lot is with outside air temperature sensors, where everything in the building is running off that outside air temperature. But if that's off, and say it's off by 10 degrees, you're maybe turning on mechanical cooling and running all your compressors at, 55 degrees when when it should be in economizer mode until 60 degrees. Because it thinks it's warmer than it is. So it could be, 60 degrees out, but it's saying it's 70 degrees out. And then you're running mechanical cooling unnecessarily. And that's a huge energy draw. So it's just finding nuisance stuff like that too, that maybe doesn't jump out at you, completely, but you got to sort of take a deeper dive to identify that.
Great data. And there's a massive, well, it sounds like quite a bit of observation time and interest in this to identify these things. So who's the best to do that? Do you designate a team member? Hey, this is what you're looking at every day. Is it you? How do you achieve this?
I look into it on the daily, and then we also have our lead engineers sort of dedicated to look at the energy consumption as well, and just to provide that feedback. And and then we also work with vendors that are in the loop, and we have bi-weekly, monthly meetings with that go over the data as well, just to identify things. So it's sort of open communication between the team and the vendors, just to keep an eye on things. But it's definitely falls on me a lot to just, like I said, digging through trends and data points and stuff like that. But it's like, I enjoy doing that. I love that. So it's like, it's what I like to do. So it's, comes naturally. Yeah.
All right. So Mike, clearly you're very passionate about what you do. You're dialed in, man. What is it that you like most about your job and why?
I like the diversity that I see of different things on a daily basis. It's just some days it's meeting heavy, other days I'm on site a lot. And I just genuinely like to help people too, and just problem solving. And just in the facilities role like this, there's just constant problems to be solved. And even if I'm not looking for them, they come onto my plate. And then if I want to get curious, like I was saying, I can just dive in and identify additional issues to take care of. So there's always something to do. Time goes by fast. And then just with everything changing and working with multiple vendors and just construction projects, there's just always more knowledge to be gained. And it's just like I was saying before, this role's a free education, and whether you like to learn or not, you're going to have to. And I like to learn. So it just comes hand in hand with, work that I'm enjoying, and then just continually to level up my knowledge. And it's just a great spot to be.
Well, you're leading it by example too, clearly, because earlier in the show, if you recall, you said that you one thing you like about your vendors is when they love what they do. You like
Correct.
working with vendors who love what they do. You love what you do. It's a good partnership there. That's great. That's awesome. So if you were to pick a piece of advice that you'd give to someone in a role the same as yours, similar to you, what advice would you give them?
I would say just to be hungry, like we talked about, with the knowledge. And just, if you're in a role like this, there's so many people you can learn from. from the property management side, from the engineering side, from vendors on site, is just have an open mind and just be a sponge and just soak up as much knowledge as possible. And then, ask a lot of questions because people, are generally like to help out more times than not. So if you have questions, it doesn't help anyone if you don't ask them, because there may be answers. And then like another thing that's super helpful too is to get other perspectives, because I have a set away in my head of how I think something's going to go and the best decision. But at the same time, I want to ask the rest of my team what their opinion is on this. And, I may not always go in that direction, but they may say something to me that shifts my perspective on the situation. And I may go on a different, direction because of that. So it's just having an open mindset to take feedback from other people besides yourself, and then just utilizing the vendors you use in your team just to be successful. Because it's, I would rather be the dumbest person in the room than the smartest person in the room, because if I'm with a bunch of people smarter than me, I'm going to level up that much more quicker. So it's just, that's sort of the way I look at it. It's just never think the only option how to find a solution.
I love your view of the world and the fact that you dive into perspective quite a bit too. It's just gain from your group, your team. Awesome. All right. So Mike, we've learned an absolute ton from you in, I don't know how much time. It feels like 2 seconds because it's just flowing. So what do you do when you're not doing this, all these things? Like, who is Mike? Like, do you travel? Do you have hobbies? Like, tell us a little bit about yourself. I'd like to know.
Yeah. So my biggest thing is I'm a dad. I have an 8-year-old son and he's my world. So first and foremost, he comes first with like anything in life. So I love spending time with him, playing sports with him, video games, reading him, just giving him advice, trying to give him, a good mindset in life, just, talking through problems. That's just, my driving force in life is just him, and my wife too. I love my family. They're first and foremost. And then besides that, I'm big into fitness. I love, going to the gym and working out. And I'm a big runner. I love trail running. So I run, I live in Stoneham. So I run in the Middlesex Fells and like Breakheart Reservation a ton. And that's just, most of my free time goes to, running or working out or something like that. And then just big into, like I said, health and fitness. So like changing interesting diets and just, and anything like that. I like to do cold plunges. Just a cold shower is another thing. I start my day every day with a cold shower, just because my sort of perspective on that is, if you can get through a minute cold shower just to blast yourself first thing in the morning, everything else rolls downhill the rest of the day. Just, not hesitating and just going through with that. So it's just, that's sort of what I'm about.
That's awesome. You sound like a couple of Navy SEALs we had on the show too. The cold shower, get through it. You can do it. The rest of your day will be easy from that. Mm-hmm. So your 8-year-old must keep you very active.
Yes, he does. Energy for days. He's like the Energizer Bunny and never slows down.
That's awesome. Mike, we've covered, I don't know how many topics we covered, but it was a lot. So I'm sure people listening will want to reach out. How would you advise they do that? How would you want people to contact you if they had more questions or wanted to learn a bit more from you?
I would say just find me on LinkedIn, send a connection request and send me direct message, and then we can talk from there. Happy to help anyone out or provide any knowledge.
Awesome. I got to tell you, man, it was absolute pleasure talking with you on the show today. Like I love your passion. I can feel it. It's just, you bleed passion and direction, and it's awesome. So can't thank you enough. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Jay. It was so enjoyable and I loved our conversation.
Of course. And for everyone listening, thank you very much for tuning in. You can follow Facility Rockstars anywhere you get your podcasts. It's been another great episode, and we'll see you next time. It's a wrap. Another episode of Facility Rockstars is in the books. Facility Rockstars is sponsored by Colutus, operating the way you operate in order to make your life easier. Until next time, facilitate and rock on.